If you're online, we're just going to wait a few minutes before we get started. Usually start about 5 minutes after. Hi.
Yes, this is my little patch.
We'll start in just about a minute. We'll start in just about a minute. Okay, I think we'll get started. Thanks all of you for joining. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you those who are joining online. It's great having you as well. Can you hear me all right online? Yeah, great. My name is Dan Zigmond. I'll be leading us in meditation here this evening. I'm a teacher in the Zen Buddhist tradition. I'm always here on the first Tuesday of the month. And our usual flow is just that I'll talk actually fairly briefly. Then we'll meditate together. We'll do 2 periods of meditation. The first about 10 minutes, which I'll give fairly active guidance. The second, usually a little bit longer, and that'll be mostly silent. And then I'll open things up for questions. And that's, for me, actually my favorite part of the evening. So I do hope some of you have brought some questions that we can talk about after we had a chance to sit together. Here at the San Francisco Dharma Collective, it's a beautiful place to practice. We have many different traditions represented. As I mentioned, I come from the Zen Buddhist tradition. That's a tradition of meditation that developed first in China, then spread to Korea, Japan, Vietnam, ultimately to America, Europe, beyond. And it really developed out of a spirit of sort of simplification, of trying to get back to the basics of Buddhist practice. And so our practice in Zen is pretty basic, is pretty simple. The Japanese term for this style of sitting is shikantaza, which usually translated as just sitting or nothing but sitting. The idea is that we sit and do nothing else, really bring nothing else. We don't have any particular mantra or visualization. We just bring our full attention, our full awareness to this very simple practice of sitting and breathing. But although it's a simple practice, I think it's also a deep practice. I sometimes think of it a little bit like riding a bike, which is very easy to describe. You just put your feet on the pedals, you put your hands on the handlebars, you pedal and you try not to fall over. There's not much else you can do in terms of describing it. It takes some practice to actually realize it, to actually be able to do it. But once you learn that very, very basic practice, there's really no limit to how far you can go. A friend of mine actually the friend who first introduced me to Zen back when I was in college, has taken his bike and doing that very simple practice, has ridden from one coast to the other twice. But each day he's just getting on and doing the same basic motion, the same basic movements that, like my daughter did the first day she learned how to ride. So similarly, Zen practice is very easy to describe. We sit, try to sit with an upright posture, our back straight, our shoulders back. You can do that on a chair, you can do it on the floor using these cushions that we have here. There's some more cushions in back. If you're at home, you can do it on a chair or a cushion, really anywhere. The most traditional posture is to cross our legs. You can also kneel, whatever allows you to be fully supported. We place our hands in our lap, one palm over the other, our thumbs lightly touching, making this circle, which has become somewhat of a symbol of Zen. You'll sometimes see calligraphy of circles drawn in Zen temples, signifying our practice, signifying emptiness. We typically tuck our chin in just a bit, cast our gaze down in front of us. In a bright room like this, it's sometimes easier to close our eyes entirely, and particularly if you're sitting at home in front of a bright screen, you might find that too. But if the lighting allows it and it's not too distracting, you can cast your gaze maybe just 2 feet in front of your legs so that your lids naturally fall about half closed. Once you're settled in this upright posture, we just bring our attention to our breathing. Not because there's anything magical about our breath, but just as a way of grounding us right here in this moment. Our breath serving as a sort of natural metronome. Allowing us to ground our attention in this moment by moment practice of just sitting. In traditional Zen temples, we keep time with bells and drums and other instruments And we do a little bit of that here. I'll use this large bell to mark the beginning and end of our meditation sessions. When we start, I'll ring the bell 3 times. Sound like this. Are you able to hear the bell online as well? Wonderful. At the end of our first period of meditation, I'll ring the bell twice. And that signals that we're going to take a short break. You have time, if you'd like, to rearrange your posture, to take a drink of water, to add or remove a layer of clothing, whatever you need. Then again, we'll ring the bell 3 times to start the second period of meditation. And when our meditation is all done for the day, I'll ring the bell just once to signal the end. As I mentioned in our first period of sitting, I'll give a fair amount of guidance, helping you with your attention. The second period, I'll be mostly silent, but you can follow the same instructions that I was giving you in the first. Are there any questions on the meditation instructions before we get started? Either in the room or online? Okay. Well, then let's each try to find our upright posture. Oh, that'd be great. If you're dialing in online, just find a comfortable place to sit in your home, your office, wherever you're joining us from. Your back straight, your shoulders back. Your arms sort of loose at your side. Your hands sitting comfortably in your lap. Your eyes closed or half closed. As I mentioned, I'll ring the bell 3 times for us to start. When you hear the bell, just listen to the sound of the bell. Listen to it until you can't hear it any longer. Then bring your attention to your breathing, and I'll pick things up from there. Let's begin. Now bring your full attention to your breathing. You don't need to match your breathing to my breathing, or to any fixed idea of how your breathing should be. Just notice each breath exactly as it is. Giving your full attention to each in-breath and each out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. If thoughts arise, let them arise and let them go. Notice these thoughts without grasping them. Notice them and release them. Don't beat yourself up for getting distracted. Just allow each breath to be a reminder to bring your attention back to the next in-breath and the next out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. Try to notice the unique qualities of each and every breath. Notice whether each breath is long or short. Notice whether each breath is fast or slow. Notice these qualities without evaluating them, without judging them, without judging yourself. Don't think to yourself, long is better than short. Don't think to yourself, fast is worse than slow. Just notice each breath exactly as it is. Giving your full attention to each in-breath and each out-breath. In-breath. Out-breath. Whatever arises, thoughts, feelings, memories, emotions. Notice them, and then come back to the next in-breath and the next out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. When you hear me ring the bell 2 times to end this first period of meditation, again, listen to the bell. Listen to it until you can't hear it any longer. Then take one more in-breath, one more out-breath, and open your eyes. One more in-breath. One more out-breath. And open your eyes. It'll just take about 2 minutes to stretch if you need to, get some water if you need to. It's lovely to see the beautiful faces online. Let's start finding our upright posture again. Our back straight, our shoulders back. Once again, I'll ring the bell 3 times for us to start. When you hear the bell, just listen to the sound of the bell. Listen to it until you can't hear it any longer. Then bring your attention to your breathing and follow the same instructions I was giving before. Let's begin. remember, whatever brought you here tonight, whatever else you have going on this week, this month, this year, nothing is more important right now, in this moment, than giving your full attention to this moment of sitting and breathing. Because if you can give your full attention to this moment, you can give your full attention to the next moment, and the moment after that, and the moment after that, and to every moment after that. And giving your full attention to every moment is what it means to be fully awake and fully alive. When you hear me ring the bell 3 times, one time, to end this meditation, once again listen to the bell. Listen to it until you can't hear it any longer. Then take one more in-breath, one more out-breath, and open your eyes. One more in-breath, one more out-breath, and open your eyes. Thank you all so much for that lovely upright sitting. So now we just have more informal time, and I'm very happy to answer questions, talk about whatever you'd like to talk about, either the meditation we just had or any questions you have about meditation or Zen, Buddhism, anything else.
Can I ask a simple question to start?
Sure.
So I know others, often when we're sitting, have issues with our legs falling asleep.
Yeah.
Is that an issue of form in terms of, I don't feel like I always know where my legs should be relative to the rest of my body.
Well, I'd say a couple of things. First, very, very common problem. I think actually my foot fell asleep while we were meditating just now. So even if you do it for years, it can still happen. It doesn't seem to be dangerous in any way. I think unless you were to sit for many, many hours, it's not going to actually cause any problems. The only thing that's potentially dangerous about it is just not standing up too quickly, because you can't really support weight on your leg when it's fallen asleep. But otherwise, it's nothing to worry about. That said, it is uncomfortable, and your specific question was, is it a issue of form? And at some level, I suppose it is, in the sense that it's like uneven pressure being placed somewhere on your leg. And so you might, if you're finding that issue a lot, you might try a slightly different posture. You might try, if you're sitting half lotus, you might try a different leg on top or something like that. And just experiment. But as I said, it still happens to me. It happened to me just now. Sometimes, if you're not used to these cushions or something like that, you haven't quite found a posture that works for your body as fluidly. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. And like I said, I don't think you're causing yourself any damage or anything like that. Yeah, please.
Hi. So I did notice that the first cycle, a lot of thoughts came in.
Yeah.
And actually, I really appreciated those thoughts because it kind of brought to the surface what kind of dilemmas I'm having on the day-to-day. So on one hand, I really feel like, oh, that's a great time. Let's process those thoughts. Let's get some, things to solve. But on the other hand, the purpose is being still in your mind as well. So kind of curious what to do.
So it's true. Often lots of thoughts do arise. I think sometimes, when our minds are more, or when we're trying to be more active, it's almost like we're talking over our own thoughts. And so then when we start being quiet, the mind fills some of that space with some of the thoughts that haven't had a place to come up. And so it's very natural, and there's nothing wrong with it. Our practice is, though, just to let the thoughts arise without doing anything. So we don't try to process them. We don't try to figure them out. We don't try to solve problems. We just let those thoughts arise and then just let them go. And in a way, it's a sort of act of faith. We're trusting that the thoughts that need to come back will come back. I very much remember this one experience I had. I do some executive coaching as well, and I was working with this executive, and he had a question very similar to yours. He said, what happens when you're sitting and a thought comes up, and it's just like, it's a really good thought, and I don't want to let it go. And our practice is to let it go anyways. If it's, I don't know, you just remembered the combination of a safe in your grandmother's house and and you want to stop for a second and write it down, I'm not going to get upset with you. But in general, our practice is just to let these things go. And to have that faith that the things that need to come back will find their way back. And just to sort of treat those thoughts like clouds in the sky that we might notice, but we don't do anything with them. Some of them stay there, some of them move, some of them disappear. And we just let that happen. Also happy to take questions from online. Yeah, please.
Hi, I just wanted to build on the last question in that, within the practice, I'm able to recognize the thought that I'm having and that I'm trying to let it go. I'm also trying to stay in that space of start where you are. But at times I have a lot that feels like it's going on that's making me feel overwhelmed. And I'm not sure how to find my way through the overwhelm. And so it's like when I'm still and these thoughts pop up, and I do take notes, and my notes have actually of things that come up. And then I can do that, okay, just start with one thing or start where you are. But the whole cacophony of all the different things that are coming in that just create that noise makes it harder for me to not feel overwhelmed by it all. So I'm not sure if you have any guidance as to how to deal with that feeling of being sort of either flooded or not knowing where to begin with, sorting it all out and kind of calming the different inputs that come in.
That's a wonderful question. I think I would start by saying that our practice when we're sitting, and there are other times when we're not sitting and when a different approach might be more appropriate. But when we're sitting, our practice is not to try to sort it all out. That's a job for another time. And so that feeling of overwhelm, that's another thing that arises when we sit. And we notice that feeling. And we try to, again, notice that feeling without grasping that feeling, without trying to do anything with it other than to notice it and know that like everything, that feeling will pass. We don't have to make it pass. We don't have to sort anything out. The cacophony that you're talking about, that's another feeling that we notice. That's another sensation, another experience. And again, in another time, at another place, it may be important to try to sort through all the different things that are going on there. But when we're sitting, that's one of the real joys of sitting, is that we get a break from having to sort all that out. It's perfectly fine when we're sitting to be feeling overwhelmed, to be feeling, I don't know, even smothered by all these things. Those are just things we notice. And we have this permission not to do anything about it, which is a wonderful freedom, not to have to sort it out. And so I guess that would be my main answer, is that, give yourself that freedom, at least during this 10, 15 minutes that we're sitting, to just let the world be cacophonous and overwhelming and loud and busy. We're sitting here in the mission. There's this car alarm that keeps going off. And, at some level, it's slightly annoying. It is literally cacophonous. And yet, I think, there's also this wonderful thing that there's nothing we can do about it. So we're off the hook. I don't think any of us in this room here feels it's our responsibility to turn off that car alarm, because we can't. It actually seems maybe it is off now. It seems to maybe it has stopped, but it's just there, and it's one of the things I really like actually about sitting here in the Dharma Collective is, we're right here in the mission, and there's a lot of noise. And so it's a wonderful experience of having that noise and that commotion, and none of it is our fault. It's just there. And so even if you're sitting, I don't know what your home environment is like, but sitting in a quieter place where there's less external noise, but maybe more internal noise, that noise isn't your fault either. And you don't have to do anything about it either. You can just treat that like the car alarm that's going off down the block. It's something that happens, you notice it. Maybe it's slightly annoying and you notice that you're slightly annoyed, but there's still nothing you have to do about it. Just let it, eventually it'll turn off. Just seems really like our car alarm has turned off now too, so it does happen. I hope that's helpful. Other questions? Yeah, please.
A couple that came up. One is a Zen question. Is it in the Mahayana school?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Do you take the Bodhisattva vow?
Yes. So when you officially become a Zen Buddhist, just usually called lay ordination, you take the Bodhisattva vows, and it's also part of the ordination as a priest. You do them again.
Okay. Also, in regards to the car, And I thank you for
Was it your
mentioning.
car?
No, it was not, but I did feel a sense of responsibility to be like, I'm going to go rip those wires right out of there in any second. And so I thank you for mentioning emotions, because I was like, is this anger? I think maybe what is this annoyance? And like trying to see the intensity of it. And but then it sort of turned into, and I've been reading Michael Pollan's new book. It turned into like, do I have compassion for the car? And then I was wondering, like, with AI and machines, do you have compassion for the machines or the robots? And when would you, at what point would you start to have compassion for them?
Yeah,
If that makes sense, I guess.
it does. Well, I don't know that you need to have any boundaries around your compassion. I think you can have compassion for all kinds of beings. I was actually talking to someone this morning who's a vegan. I'm not a vegan. I'm a vegetarian, but I'm not a vegan. And I was sort of curious, sort of where he draws boundaries in his diet, and somehow it came up. I guess because I took a trip up north with my girlfriend over the weekend, and she had oysters. And I don't eat oysters as a vegetarian. On the other hand, like, an oyster is a pretty basic kind of being. Like, it wasn't totally clear to me looking at this, like, sort of puddle of goo. It didn't look that different than like a mushroom. And I know it is at some level, but it's, it doesn't have a face. It doesn't really move. So I found myself wondering, I mean, I had no desire to eat this puddle of goo. But I was wondering, like, well, why not? Like, how different is it than like a mushroom or yeast or these other things that I do eat? And I suppose I do have, I don't eat it in part because it looks gross, but in part because I do have compassion for those kinds of beings. But why? And there are certain branches of vegetarians, I think, in the Hindu and maybe Jain traditions, that don't eat root vegetables, because root vegetables, you have to kill the plant to eat it, whereas like fruits and other kinds of vegetables, like, you don't kill the plant, and so they don't want to kill the plant. So they're having this compassion for the plant, and they don't want to take that life. I do eat, potatoes and carrots and things, and I don't know, maybe I should have more compassion for plants. So your question was about sort of almost like the other side of this spectrum, things like artificial intelligence. And I don't know. I mean, I think if you feel compassion for such things, then that's wonderful and fine. Like, again, I don't think, it's really hard for me to imagine somebody saying they feel compassion for an entity and me telling them, well, I don't think you should feel that compassion. So these really strict vegetarians that feel compassion for carrots and potatoes, like, that's great. I mean, for whatever reason, that doesn't come naturally to me, but if it does to them, that's wonderful. And I do use, AI tools, some these days, and yeah, I do sometimes wonder what's going on the other side of these things, and if we should feel compassion. And I think if you do naturally find yourself feeling compassion, then you should feel that. You should feel what you feel. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Yeah. Oh,
I also have a Zen question.
okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the 5 aggregates?
The 5 aggregates. What makes you want to know about the 5 aggregates, or what do you want to know?
I was just reading a book and it talked about it, and I couldn't understand exactly what's the differentiation between some of them.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that I can do a good job of dissecting them myself. One of the things in Zen is that we don't Yeah, we don't spend a lot of time on sort of almost like textual criticism, like trying to get really into the details of these various sort of concepts or ways of dividing the world. I mean, I do talk about some of them in some of my lectures, in retreats and things, but in general, like the central sutra, the teaching that's the most chanted as part of the service at a traditional Zen temple is what's called the Heart Sutra. And really the core of the Heart Sutra is to go through all of these things, the aggregates, the Four Noble Truths, birth and death, and essentially to say all of these are fundamentally empty. They're sort of, they might be useful guideposts in some situations, but they have no real substance to them. They're not real. An analogy that's often used in Zen is it's like the finger that's pointing at the moon, but it's not the moon. Or it's the map that describes a place, but it's not the place. And in Zen, we want to go to the place. And so even in my own practice, I don't spend a lot of time studying those sorts of things, and don't really recommend with my students to spend a lot of time on them. Zen is a much more mundane and kind of matter-of-fact practice where we just try to come back to this sitting. And so, I don't necessarily discourage people from studying these other sorts of Buddhist doctrines, and I have in the past done some of that, and but it's not really my focus. Do we have other questions online, perhaps? I see a couple of regulars there, and anyone have anything they'd like to ask? But also in the room, it's fine. Yeah, do you have another question? Okay, please, go ahead.
Another thing I've been doing Tibetan Sa Lum recently, which is a subtle body practice. And when you mentioned there at the end about what it means to be fully awake, is that full presence? And I've noticed this with Eve too sometimes. It's usually right here, kind of. And I got it again where I was like, oh, can it be also like, is that awakened aliveness embodied in Zen too?
Yeah, I think we feel
You
that.
feel it here?
Yeah, it's very common for people to say they feel that in their belly, or in their chest. Yeah, I think that feeling of being fully awake, it can manifest in lots of different ways. Some people feel it very visually. Suddenly colors seem brighter, sounds seem more clear. But for some, it's a much more embodied experience. And Zen is an embodied practice. That's why we spend a lot of time talking about posture. In my retreats, I go around and do posture adjustments for people to help them find that upright posture, because it is a very physical practice. So yeah, it can be an embodied experience. Looks like we have a question online. Someone has their hand up, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to know because what I do mostly Vipassana practice, and what I've been told is Zen is a very strict practice. So can you elaborate on that? Like I don't have experience, so yeah.
Yeah, It's funny because I think of Vipassana practice as very strict. So maybe everybody just thinks the other people are strict. Uh, Traditional Zen practice is a bit austere, and maybe that's part of what they mean by strict. It's a very sort of stripped down practice. It does, if you go to a traditional Zen retreat, it's a lot of just silent sitting meditation. Vipassana, particularly the way it's practiced in the States and in the West, and particularly in the tradition of 10-day retreats and things like that, is just a much more varied practice. There's more different sorts of things that you do in the course of a Vipassana retreat, whereas in a Zen retreat, you basically do silent sitting practice, unguided, pretty much the whole time. I was helping a friend, I am helping a friend with a new meditation app that he's putting together, and he asked me to listen to the first practice. And the first practice, you started silent, and then you paid attention to your breathing, and then you did a body scan, and then there was like a visualization of imagining you were at a beach. Anyways, there were like 8 different things in like a 10-minute meditation. And my main feedback was like, yeah, like I don't do 8 different things in a whole weekend when I am teaching meditation. It just seemed like an awful lot to do in 10 minutes. But yeah, Zen is a very stripped down practice. The practice that we just did, the instructions I gave, I mean, that's like the whole thing. So, and for example, a lot of Tibetan traditions, you will do silent meditation, but you do silent meditation as like a first step, and then like you learn all these other steps. And with Zen, we just stay at that first step. We don't really, there's nowhere else to go. And so, if you go to a monastery like Tassajara down south here, there's residents there who've lived there for 10 years, and they're still basically doing shikantaza, doing what we were doing this evening. So, as I said, I'm not sure I would use the word strict, but it is this very stripped down, sort of simple practice, and that's more or less all we do. And so it's much less varied than some of these other traditions. But I do feel it has a lot in common with Vipassana. I do feel Vipassana also, particularly modern Vipassana, grew out of a desire to kind of go back to basics of meditation. The modern Vipassana tradition more or less comes out of Burma in the 50s, I think, and that was again a sort of back to basics movement in the same way that Zen was, more like 1,000 years ago. And so although if you look at a Buddhist family tree, Zen and Vipassana are about as far apart as they can be, I think there is a closeness in spirit to the two traditions, and I think they have more in common than might appear. Thank you. Yeah, please. Yep.
So I'm at a stage in my life where I'm thinking about an important decision, and I can tell you about the context, but I think that the general sort of dilemma I'm facing is following my analytical mind versus my emotional reaction to a dynamic in my life. And so I'm wondering if there's any insight relevant to this.
Yeah. So I think it is, the implication of what you're saying is that these two ways of processing a decision, the emotional and the analytical, are leading you in different directions. So that's difficult. And I sympathize there. And it's hard to know, each of those can lead us astray. And so I don't know that there's like a shorthand heuristic that guarantees a good decision when those things disagree. Buddha taught that bad decisions tend to come from one or more of these three roots of greed, hate, and delusion. I always think the first two are usually easier to identify. So we shouldn't make a decision out of greed, so out of a selfishness of wanting to just accumulate more. We shouldn't make a decision out of hate, so trying to hurt somebody else, like, don't date someone just to get back at someone else, or, don't quit your job just to get back at your boss. Like, don't make a decision just to hurt somebody else. But I think for most of us, that's a pretty easy and obvious lesson, and we can catch ourselves when we're about to make a decision that feels mostly driven by greed or mostly driven by hate. So this third instruction, not to make a decision that's driven by delusion, I think that's really the hard one for most of us, because what that really means is don't make a decision. So what is delusion? Delusion is some sort of misunderstanding or misperception about the world. And so how do we know if we're misperceiving or misunderstanding the world? But put in the positive way, what Buddha's telling us is to try to make decisions based on seeing the world clearly. So how do we see the world clearly? I do think meditation can help. I've sometimes used the analogy of meditation being like cleaning my glasses or something, that it doesn't like give me new information, but it allows me to see things more clearly, to take in information more directly. And so, on the one hand, that sort of emotional reaction, sometimes we think of that as clouding our vision. But on the other hand, sometimes I think that emotional reaction is telling us something. So for example, sometimes we make a big decision, and we immediately feel like a sense of relief. Like it feels really good. And sometimes we make a decision and it's the opposite. We immediately think like, what have I done? I often think that tells us something. I know people who sometimes they play this sort of game where, like, let's say you tell me the decision A or B, and you ask me to make it for you. And so I make it for you. I say, you got to do B. And then we ask, like, so how does that feel? Does that feel good? Does that feel terrible? Do you feel like, wait, no, I want to do A? Or do you feel like, oh, yes, thank you, B, that feels right. And it doesn't even matter what I say. The question is just like, how does it feel to hear it? And to feel in that moment that maybe that's what you have to do. But at the same time, these emotions can sometimes lead us in bad directions. So sometimes you have the opposite experience, for example, where maybe there's a job that you hate, and then one day you get fired. Well, maybe you should feel good because like you didn't like the job anyways, you didn't want to do it, but suddenly you really like the job. Suddenly you really wish you could stay, even though maybe the day before you had been really thinking you should quit. But that emotional reaction to getting fired has somehow scrambled everything for you, and now suddenly, and you can have that in a relationship too. You can be in a terrible relationship and really be thinking about how to get out of it, and then your partner ends it, and now suddenly you're devastated. So this is just a really long-winded way of saying it. I think it's hard, and I think we just have to do our best to try to see the world clearly, to try to basically take in both of those sources of information, the analytical kind of reasoned approach, and then the emotional, how does it feel? Try to sort out what's real in those two things. Try not to be swayed by delusion, by misunderstanding, and do our best. But it's hard. Yeah, please.
So, just another question. quite similar, actually. Something that I always found a bit challenging is, and it's almost like there is an invisible line between when a person is facing a challenge, that you have two options. Either you walk towards the challenge and try to grow out of it, or just take a step back and I don't want to handle that. And I don't know if there is a recipe. How do you do that? But I was just wondering if something in Buddhism or the Buddha has any wisdom behind it. Because I'm trying to identify where's the line, where's the thick line when say, okay, that's enough, that's not healthy, or no, you're just facing a big climb right now, but then you're going to have a wonderful view after.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really the same question, and so unfortunately, mostly the same answer, which is there really is no way to know. And you can make a mistake in both directions. You can give up too quickly and you can hang on too long. And those both, will lead you to suffering. And it's really hard to know that balance. All we can do is what we do in our practice, which is just to really try to pay attention and just look for that line and try to be honest with ourselves about it. But there's no way someone else can tell you where it is. Yeah, sometimes we're in a situation, maybe with a person who's really difficult. And, on the one hand, we don't want to give them too much power, and just because they're difficult, we walk away. On the other hand, we don't want to torture ourselves unnecessarily and stay in a situation which maybe we don't need to stay in. And again, you can make a mistake in both directions. You can give up too soon and you can hang on too long. And there's no shortcut to figuring out where you are. We just have to try to pay attention, to try to see the world as clearly as we can, and try to react as honestly and genuinely as we can. Yeah, another question in the room. And then if there's more questions online, I'm very open to more questions online.
Actually, I have two comments.
Yes.
Something that a teacher of mine, a Zen teacher, actually taught me a long time ago is sometimes when you're stuck, when you can't make a decision about something, just wait. And I mean, that seems simple, and so of course, sometimes you can't wait. But generally, I've found since I learned that if I wait, at some point, it does become clear. Like I do know what the right choice is. And then I just wanted to say that Vince Fakuri, who's I think he's more of a Theravadan. He does he calls it pragmatic Dharma. But anyway, he's a very interesting blogger, and he's been talking a lot recently about AI, and he's been having conversations with AI and trying to sort of investigate their sentience. So you might be interested in that. I haven't listened to them, but I've listened to other things of his, and he's pretty good. So
Thank you. Any of our other online folks who'd like to ask anything? Right. Yeah.
When does the chanting come in Zen? I feel like you mentioned that you chant the Heart Sutra. I have at the Zen Center, I think, chanted a loving kindness prayer, perhaps. And I'm just curious how that folds into the sitting practice.
Yeah, a traditional Zen temple would follow, roughly this would be the schedule. You'd wake up early in the morning, sometimes, 4 or 5. You start with morning meditation, usually somewhere around an hour. Then you would have a morning service. So you do a Buddhist service where you do some chanting of very often the Heart Sutra. That's the most common. The sutra you're referring to is the Metta Sutta. That's sometimes chanted too, but the Heart Sutra is the most traditional. And you light incense and you do some different things. Then you probably would have breakfast. Then if you're doing a retreat, you would meditate again. And you're usually alternating periods of 40 minutes of sitting, 10 minutes of walking, 40 minutes of sitting, 10 minutes of walking. You would do that. Then you would do a brief service at noon, where again, you would have some sort of sutra chanting. And these are maybe 10 minutes, they're not long. Then you would have lunch, then you would follow a similar schedule in the afternoon, and then there's usually an evening service, which again, short, 10, 15 minutes, involving some sutra chanting and incense and things, more meditation, and then you would retire for the night. And sometimes at the very, I don't know actually if they do this in Japan, but in the States, it's become quite common to have the three refuges. I take refuge in Buddha, I take refuge in Dharma, I take refuge in Sangha, to say that as the last thing, chant that as the last thing at night before turning out the lights and going to sleep. So one thing about a traditional Zen retreat is there's a fair amount of ritual in it. And that's one of the differences between Zen and some of kind of the modern Western, like insight meditation traditions, is just we have a lot more ritual, chanting, incense, those bowing, those sorts of things. Yeah. I saw Riley put her camera on for a minute. Did you have a question or just wanted to say hello? Any other questions online? All right.
I
Well,
think
maybe
I'm muted, I think, but I heard my name and yes, I am here. I actually feel quite open with not many questions on my heart, which is curious because I usually am full of questions, but I think I'm just in a receiving and listening mood and I wish to be there in person. So I'm
next
also
month.
noticing a lot, like my body awareness is kind of in a little bit of movement. And so that's why I have my camera off because I don't want to be distracting for very still spaces.
Well,
So
maybe you can join us in person another time, but thank you for joining us online.
I shall. And thank you so much. And I really love everyone's questions. And thank you. Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll wrap up. Are there any announcements from the Dharma Collective? Yeah. Okay. Well, again, I'm here once a month on the first Tuesday of the month. If you'd like to be on my mailing list, you can search me up online. It's easy to find, and then you'll hear about when I'm here, of course, but also the other retreats that I lead and other places where I teach. I do really appreciate everybody joining, and the Dharma Collective is a wonderful place to practice. I'm really enjoying spending time here, and I really appreciate all of you coming and joining us this evening. And now hear about a few other things that are going on.
Yes, thank you all for coming, and thank you online for coming. And thank you, Dan, for being here. This was very lovely. I really enjoyed the sit. Real quickly, the Dharma Collective is run on Dana. I guess Japanese then do Dana too. So it is based on generosity. So please contribute as much as you feel you can and is a practice for you in generosity. We have a small recommendation of somewhere between 15 and 30, but anywhere along that line is fine. And we really love everyone being here is the highest priority. So just a few things coming up. It is kind of a busy month, so I do encourage everyone to just sign up for the website or the newsletter or check our website. This weekend we have Opening Doorways. It is a film screening on the Paramitas, and it is Saturday from 10 to 2. And then please come next month to Dan Sit, the first Tuesday. And we also, this Sunday, is Transforming Conflict into Connection, a language alchemy approach with Alejandra Soroka. And that is Sunday, March 8th from 10 a.m. to noon. Oh, and next week, really quick, if any of you, this is a new class, it's an Enneagram class. So if any of you like working with your Enneagram, it is on Tuesday from 7:15 to 8:45. Okay. Okay, it is 7, here it says 7:15 to 8:45, I believe. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Please come back. It's great to see you all. And thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good night. Oh, thanks for coming. Thank you. Good to see you again. I took a couple of your weekend workshops at Esalen years back. I've been wanting to come ever since.